Welcome to SMR Dreams. This is a place where we gently dive into the past, so that you may fall asleep peacefully and effortlessly, while learning something meaningful. Do not forget to subscribe and leave a like, because by the end of this lecture, you will be sleeping deeply and soundly. And now, let us begin our journey into history. Prepare yourself for a voyage through the centuries, to an age when the greatest empire of the ancient world was only beginning to take shape. Close your eyes and allow the voice of history to carry you to the quiet banks of the Tiber River, to a distant time when everything was just beginning. According to ancient traditions, retold by historians such as Titus Livius, the city of Rome was founded in the year 753 BCE. Twin brothers, Romulus and Remus, abandoned as infants, nourished by a she-wolf, and later raised by a humble shepherd. About where the city should stand and who should rule it, the quarrel ended in tragedy. Romulus killed his brother Remus, and upon the 7 hills, Palatine, Capitoline, Aventine, Quirinal, Viminal, Esquiline, and Celian, he laid the first stones of the new city, naming it Roma after himself. Romulus became the first king of Rome and founded the Senate, a council of elders destined to guide Roman politics for centuries. For many years, Rome was ruled by kings. After Romulus came Numa Pompilius. He established religious rituals, priestly orders, and a sacred calendar, seeking to calm the warlike spirit of the Romans. He was followed by Tullus Hostilius, a fierce warrior king, who destroyed the rival city of Alba Longa and strengthened Rome's military traditions. Next came Ancus Marcius, who built the first bridge across the Tiber and founded the port of Ostia, opening Rome to the vast world of Mediterranean trade. But the true transformation of royal Rome came with the Etruscan dynasty. Near the end of the 6th century BCE, Lucius Tarquinius Priscus, also known as Tarquin the Elder, ascended the throne. He began massive building projects, draining marshes between the hills, and constructing the Cloaca Maxima, the great sewer that would serve Rome for centuries. He also laid the foundations for the temple of Jupiter Optimus Maximus on the Capitoline Hill, the future spiritual heart of Rome. His successor, Servius Tullius, ruled during a pivotal moment in Roman history. Around 550 BCE, he introduced sweeping reforms. Roman society was no longer organized by birth, but by wealth. Citizens were divided into classes and centuries, and a man's military service and voting power depended on his property. These reforms weakened the ancient power of the patrician clans and slowly opened political life to the common people. The plebeians. The last, the 7th king of Rome, was Lucius Tarquinius Superbus, Tarquin the Proud. His reign was marked by cruelty, arrogance, and tyranny. He ignored the Senate, executed opponents, and ruled as a despot. His downfall came in 509 BCE, after a monstrous crime committed by his son. Sextus Tarquinius violated the virtuous Lucretia, wife of the nobleman Lucius Tarquinius Collatinus. Unable to live with the shame, Lucretia took her own life in front of her family, calling upon them to seek justice. Her death became the spark that ignited revolution. Led by Lucius Junius Brutus, the Roman people and Senate rose up and expelled Tarquin the Proud and his entire family from Rome. The monarchy was abolished. A new era had begun, the age of the Roman Republic. Power passed to 2 consuls, elected each year, the first being Brutus and Collatinus themselves. An oath was sworn, never again would Rome accept a king. Yet the young republic immediately faced danger. The exiled Tarquin sought help from Lars Porsena, king of the Etruscan city of Clusium. In 508 BCE, Porsena's army laid siege to Rome. It was during this crisis that legends were born Horatius Cocles, while Romans destroyed it behind him. Gaius Mucius Scaevola, captured while attempting to assassinate Porsenna, placed his right hand into a blazing fire, showing contempt for pain and death. Astonished by Roman courage, Porsenna eventually lifted the siege and made peace. Though external threats faded, a deeper conflict grew within Rome. Patricians, the ancient aristocracy, and plebeians. The common people were destined to clash. Plebeians, farmers, craftsmen, merchants, soldiers, built Rome with their hands and blood, yet lacked political rights and suffered under harsh death laws. In 494 BCE, as Rome fought the Volsci and Aqui, the plebeians reached their breaking point. They withdrew from the city and gathered on the sacred mount, declaring they would found their own community. This act, known as the First Secession of the Plebs, was a peaceful but powerful strike. Rome, deprived of its workforce and army, stood on the brink of collapse. The patricians yielded. Plebeians gained the right to elect their own sacred officials, the tribunes of the people. The tribunes possessed veto power, able to block decisions of magistrates and even the Senate. Their persons were inviolable, their homes always open to those seeking protection. The laws were unwritten. Only patricians interpreted them, public and equal for all. In 451 BCE, a board of 10 men, the decemvirs, was appointed to codify Roman law. 1 year later, in 450 BCE, the famous 12 tables were engraved on bronze tablets and displayed for all to see. The foundation of Roman law had been laid, and now allow your mind to rest. The 12 tables defined the foundations of private property and of criminal law, though their punishments were severe. Remember the ancient principle, an eye for an eye, a tooth for a tooth. For the first time in Roman history, judges themselves were placed under the authority of written law. One of the tablets declared, "Let the will of the people be the highest law." A school of citizenship, studied and memorized by generations of Romans, from childhood to old age, yet the struggle was far from over. In 445 BCE, the tribune of the people, Gaius Canuleius, passed a law allowing marriage between patricians and plebeians. Another wall between the classes quietly crumbled. Then, in 367 BCE, after years of bitter resistance, the Licinian section laws were finally adopted, and most importantly, opened the highest magistracy of Rome, the consulship, to the plebeians. In 366 BCE, Lucius Sextius Lateranus became the first plebeian consul. The road to supreme power was no longer closed. While these political battles unfolded within Rome, the Republic was fighting almost constantly for survival and dominance in Italy. War became Rome's harshest teacher. From these struggles emerged the disciplined, relentless, and eventually unstoppable Roman legions. One of Rome's most dangerous enemies in the 5th century BCE was the wealthy Etruscan city of Veii. Located only a short distance north of Rome, rivalry over fertile lands and key trade routes ignited decades of conflict. From 406 to 396 BCE, under the command of the dictator Marcus Furius Camillus, Roman soldiers were paid regular wages for the first time in history. And according to legend, a secret tunnel was dug beneath the walls, allowing Roman forces to emerge inside the city. Veii was destroyed, its lands, its treasures, its power passed into Roman hands. Rome now stood as the strongest state in central Italy. Waves of Gallic warriors poured down from the north, led by the chieftain Brennus. At the Battle of the River Allia, the Roman army was utterly shattered. Legions broke and fled in terror. The road to Rome lay open. Only the Capitoline Hill could be defended. Legend tells us that sacred geese kept in the temple of Juno saved the city, their frantic cries awakening sleeping guards and foiling a surprise night assault. When the starving defenders of the Capitoline agreed to ransom the city. At that moment, Camillus returned, appointed dictator in Rome's darkest hour, gathering surviving citizens and allied forces. He defeated the Gauls and drove them from the city. The memory of this disaster, the Gallic sack of Rome, never faded. It hardened Roman resolve. Massive new fortifications known as the Servian walls were constructed. Bruised, burned, yet unbroken, Rome began the long work of rebuilding. Internal conflict flared once more. Around 380 BCE lived the legendary Marcus Manlius Capitolinus, hero of the Capitoline's defense. Seeing plebeians ruined by debt after the Gallic invasion, he spent his own fortune to free them from bondage. The patricians accused him of seeking tyranny. The man who saved Rome was executed, thrown from the very Tarpeian rock he once defended. His tragic fate became a dark symbol of Rome's merciless politics. Yet the expansion of plebeian rights could no longer be stopped. In 326 BCE, the Lex Poetalia Papiria abolished debt slavery for Roman citizens. Freedom was now legally separated from slavery. In 287 BCE, after another plebeian secession to the Janiculum Hill, the dictator Quintus Hortensius passed a historic law. From that day forward, decisions of the plebeian assemblies, plebiscites, became binding on all Romans, patricians included. The long struggle of the orders was at last largely complete. A new ruling class emerged, the nobility, made up of powerful families from both patrician and plebeian origins. At this moment of fragile unity, Rome faced a challenge that would shape its destiny for generations. In southern Italy lay the rich cities of Magna Graecia, Greek colonies such as Tarentum, Neapolis, and Croton. Wealthy, cultured, yet politically divided, their prosperity attracted Rome, and their disunity made them vulnerable. The spark came in 282 BCE. Rome placed a garrison in the city of Thurii, violating earlier agreements. Tarentum considered this an act of war. Its citizens attacked and destroyed a Roman fleet in their harbor and insulted Roman envoys. War became inevitable, knowing they could not face Rome alone. The Tarentines called upon one of the greatest commanders of the Hellenistic world, Pyrrhus, king of Epirus, a relative of Alexander the Great, dreaming of building his own Western empire. Pyrrhus accepted eagerly. In 280 BCE, he landed in Italy with 25,000 soldiers and 20 war elephants, creatures the Romans had never seen before. At the Battle of Heraclea, Rome was stunned. Roman legions met the Macedonian phalanx and the terrifying elephants. The legions wavered. Pyrrhus won, but the cost was dreadful. His elite army suffered losses it could not easily replace. According to tradition, Pyrrhus exclaimed, "One more such victory, and I am lost." Thus was born the phrase, a Pyrrhic victory. Unable to force Rome into peace, Pyrrhus marched deeper into Italy. In 279 BCE, at the Battle of Asculum, he defeated Rome again, and again. His losses were devastating. Displayed extraordinary endurance. Fabricius, poor, incorruptible, became a living symbol of ancient Roman virtue. Even Pyrrhus, who tried to bribe him, was forced to admire his honesty, realizing that his campaign in Italy was leading nowhere. Pyrrhus, in 278 BCE, accepted an invitation from the Greeks of Sicily and sailed across the sea to fight against Carthage. His absence gave the Romans time to breathe, to regroup, to adapt, and to reclaim lost ground. When Pyrrhus returned to Italy in 275 BCE, he did not face the same army as before. He faced a new Rome, a Rome taught by suffering, hardened by defeat, and transformed by experience. The decisive battle took place near Beneventum, in the land of Samnium. The Roman commander, the consul Manius Curius Dentatus, another embodiment of Roman simplicity and virtue, managed to turn Pyrrhus' own elephants against his ranks. Panic spread. The Macedonian phalanx broke. Roman legions surged forward. Pyrrhus' army was crushed. Having lost nearly 2/3 of his forces, the great commander was forced to abandon Italy. 3 years later, he died in a street fight in Argos, far from the dreams of empire that once burned in his heart. Rome's victory over Pyrrhus opened the road to the south. By 270 BCE, all Greek cities of southern Italy, including Tarentum, recognized Roman authority. For the first time in history, the entire Italian peninsula, from the Rubicon River in the north to the Strait of Messina in the south, stood under Roman control. Rome had become the dominant power of the western Mediterranean, and naturally, Roman eyes turned southward, across the narrow strait, to a rich and fertile island, Sicily. An island destined to become the apple of discord between two great civilizations. Yet beyond that island, on the opposite shore, stood another city, older, wealthier, and even more formidable, Carthage. Two giants, Rome and Carthage, separated only by a thin ribbon of sea. Their clash was inevitable. This clash, unfolding across 3 vast and merciless wars, would be remembered as the Punic Wars. The first of these wars would force Rome, a land power, to learn how to conquer the sea. But this is the beginning of a new chapter, one we will explore next time. For now, allow images of steadfast legions, incorruptible consuls, and the retreating Pyrrhus to drift gently into the depths of your consciousness, lulling you with the breath of vanished ages. Rome now ruled all of Italy, from the valley of the Po in the north to the very tip of the Italian boot in the south. Its legions, forged in endless wars against Samnites, Etruscans, and Gauls, had no equal on land. Yet just beyond the Strait of Messina lay Sicily, rich, fertile, and strategically priceless. And Sicily was long desired by another master of the seas, Carthage. Carthage, a Phoenician colony on the North African coast, was far more than a city. It was a maritime empire. Its ships sailed from the Pillars of Hercules to the shores of the Levant. Its treasuries overflowed with gold and silver. Its trading posts dotted the coasts of Sicily, Sardinia, and Corsica. The Carthaginian fleet, hundreds of powerful quinquerenes, ruled the waves. Rome, by contrast, possessed almost no navy. 2 great powers, one of the land, one of the sea, coexisted for a time, even signing alliances. But destiny was preparing their collision. As so often in history, the spark came from a smaller state. In 288 BCE, the Mamertines, mercenaries once employed by the tyrant Agathos of Syracuse, seized the Sicilian city of Messana. Trapped between King Hiero II of Syracuse and Carthaginian forces, the Mamertines split into factions. One appealed to Carthage, another appealed to Rome. For Rome, this was a painful choice. To aid the Mamertine meant war with Carthage, whose naval and financial power dwarfed Rome's own, yet to allow Carthage to control Messana, at the narrow gateway between Italy and Sicily, was equally unthinkable. After fierce debate in the Senate, the decision was placed before the popular assembly. Tempted by visions of land, plunder, and glory, the people voted for war. Thus, in 264 BCE, a conflict began that would last 23 years. The First Punic War. The consul Appius Claudius Caudex was the first to ferry Roman troops to Sicily. The Romans quickly expelled the Carthaginian garrison from Messana and defeated Hiero of Syracuse, soon winning him as an ally. But the true struggle still lay ahead. The Carthaginians withdrew to their mighty fortresses at Drepana and Lilybaeum on Sicily's western coast. These cities were nearly impossible to capture by land, and Rome could not supply armies by sea. Rome had no fleet. So the Romans attempted the impossible. They decided to build one. Legend says a captured Carthaginian quinquereme served as the model. In just 60 days, shipyards across Italy produced 100 warships and 20 transports. Romans were excellent soldiers, but poor sailors. To overcome this weakness, they invented a brilliant device, the corvus, a boarding bridge fitted with a heavy iron spike. When a Roman ship closed with an enemy, the corvus crashed down, embedding its spike into the deck. Roman legionaries ran across the bridge and turned naval battles into infantry combat. In 260 BCE, under the consul Gaius Duilius, the corvus was used in battle for the first time. The Carthaginian fleet, confident in its superiority, was utterly defeated. 50 ships were captured. To commemorate Rome's first naval victory, a rostral column, decorated with the bronze rams of enemy ships, was erected in the Ramon Forum. Duilius received unprecedented honors. A torchbearer always walked before him, and flutes played whenever he appeared in public. Emboldened, Rome decided to carry the war to Africa itself. In 256 BCE, a massive fleet led by the consuls Marcus Atilius Regulus and Lucius Manlius Valso Longus defeated the Carthaginians at Cape Ecnomus, one of the largest naval battles of antiquity. Africa lay open. Regulus landed, ravaged Carthaginian territory, and advanced toward the city, desperate. Carthage sued for peace. Regulus' terms were so harsh they chose to fight on. Salvation came in the form of a gifted commander, Xanthiphes, a Spartan mercenary. He reorganized the Carthaginian army, emphasizing cavalry and war elephants. In 255 BCE, on the plains near Tunis, Xanthippus annihilated Regulus' army. Regulus himself was captured. The attempt to rescue survivors ended in disaster. A Roman fleet was wrecked by a violent storm off southern Sicily. Out of 364 ships, only 80 survived. More than 100,000 men were swallowed by the sea. One of the greatest maritime catastrophes in history. Yet Rome endured, again and again. After defeats and storms, Rome rebuilt its fleets, taxing itself to exhaustion, refusing to surrender. The war dragged on, with victories and disasters on both sides. But that is a story we shall continue in our next meeting, of a long, exhausting war of attrition. And it was here that the star of a new Carthaginian commander rose, Hamilcar, called Barca, which meant lightning. From his mountain strongholds, he waged a masterful guerrilla war, striking swiftly, vanishing into the rugged terrain, slowly wearing down Roman legions. By 242 BCE, both sides were drained to the edge of collapse. Rome, gathering its final strength, built a new fleet of 200 ships, funded entirely by public donations. Command was given to the consul Gaius Lutatius Catulus. In March of 241 BCE, he intercepted a Carthaginian fleet carrying supplies to Hamilcar near the Aegates Islands. Off the western coast of Sicily, Carthaginian ships, heavy with provisions, were slow and clumsy. They were annihilated. 120 vessels were sunk or captured. The war was over. Carthage sued for peace. The terms were harsh. Carthage paid 3,200 talents of silver immediately, and another 1,000 over the next 10 years. It surrendered Sicily and all smaller islands between Italy and Sicily. Sicily became Rome's first overseas province, governed by a Roman magistrate. With this step, the Roman Republic began its transformation into an empire. But peace was fragile. No sooner had the war ended than Carthage was torn apart by a terrifying uprising. The mercenary war, also called the Truceless War, from 241 to 238 BCE. Carthage stood on the brink of annihilation. Only the genius of Hamilcar Barca saved the city. Rome, exploiting Carthage's weakness and openly violating the treaty, seized Sardinia and Corsica. Hamilcar never forgave this humiliation. Before departing for Spain, where he intended to build a new Carthaginian empire and gather resources for future war, he brought his 9-year-old son before an altar and made him swear eternal hatred toward Rome. That child's name, Hannibal. That oath would shape the fate of the Mediterranean for decades. While Hamilcar, and after his death, his son-in-law Hasdrubal the Fair, subdued Spain and founded new Carthage, modern Cartagena, Rome consolidated its power. In 229 to 228 BCE, Rome fought its first war against Illyrian pirates, establishing a protectorate along the eastern Adriatic coast. Rome's influence spread. In 221 BCE, Hasdrubal was assassinated. Command in Spain passed to 26-year-old Hannibal, young, brilliant, and burning with hatred for Rome. He was ready. The pretext for war was the city of Saguntum, a Roman ally on Spain's eastern coast. In 219 BCE, after an 8-month siege, Hannibal captured and destroyed the city. Rome demanded Hannibal's surrender. Carthage refused. War was inevitable. Thus, in 218 BCE, began the Second Punic War, a struggle for annihilation, the greatest trial Rome had ever faced. Rome planned to fight in the traditional way. One consul would sail to Africa to strike at Carthage itself. The other would march to Spain to confront Hannibal. Hannibal shattered these plans. He did the unthinkable. He led 50,000 soldiers and war elephants across the Pyrenees, through southern Gaul, and over the snow-covered Alps, a journey of 5 months. Half his army perished. At the rivers Ticinus and Trebia, Hannibal won his first victories. In spring, Hannibal crossed the marshes of the Arno Valley. Catching the Romans off guard, Consul Gaius Flaminius, a champion of aggressive war, rushed to intercept him without waiting for reinforcements. On the morning of June 21st, 217 BCE, near Lake Trasimene, Hannibal sprang a perfect ambush. Hidden by thick mist, the Roman army marched into a narrow corridor between the lake and the hills. At the signal, Carthaginian forces attacked from all sides. The Romans had no space to form ranks. It was not a battle. It was a slaughter. Flaminius fell. 15,000 Romans died. Another 15,000 were captured. The road to Rome lay open. Panic seized the city. The Senate appointed a dictator, Quintus Fabius Maximus, later called the Delayer. Fabius understood that Hannibal could not be beaten in open battle. He adopted a strategy of exhaustion. Shadow the enemy. Destroy supplies. Harass detachments. Avoid decisive combat. It was wise. And hated. Romans demanded battle. They called Fabius a coward. In 216 BC, when his dictatorship ended, 2 consuls were elected. Lucius Aemilius Paulus, cautious, and Gaius Terentius Varro, reckless, promising to crush Hannibal at once. Command alternated daily, and on Varro's day, August 2nd, 216 BCE, near the small town of Cannae, history changed. Hannibal faced 80,000 Romans with 50,000 men. He arranged his army in a crescent shape, the center weak, the flanks strong. Gauls and Iberians held the center. Veteran African infantry stood on the sides. On the wings, the unmatched Numidian cavalry. Varro hurled the Roman legions straight into the center. The Carthaginian center slowly retreated. The crescent bent inward. Romans surged forward. They walked into a trap. The African infantry swung inward. The cavalry crushed Rome's horsemen and attacked from behind. The Roman army was encircled. What followed was extermination. 50 to 70,000 Romans died. A consul, 80 senators. An entire army vanished. Hannibal lost only a fraction. Cannae became a symbol of absolute destruction. Rome seemed doomed. Allies defected. Capua joined Hannibal. Samnites, Lucanians. Bruttians rose in rebellion. Even King Philip V of Macedon allied with Carthage. Yet Rome endured. The Senate refused surrender. New legions were raised. Slaves were armed. Teenagers marched. Rome became a fortress. Most Latin allies remained loyal. Rome's strength lay not only in armies, but in its unbreakable system and its iron will. From this moment onward, the Romans returned to the strategy of Fabius Maximus. They avoided large-scale battles with Hannibal, but methodically reclaimed city after city, destroyed his supply bases, and isolated his allies. The war became a war of exhaustion. Hannibal, like a restless shadow, roamed through southern Italy, unable to gather the strength to besiege Rome itself. Meanwhile, Rome opened new fronts. A young and gifted commander, Publius Cornelius Scipio, future Scipio Africanus, who had miraculously survived Cannae, sailed to Spain in 210 BCE. In 209 BCE, with a sudden and daring strike, he captured New Carthage, the main Carthaginian base on the peninsula. At the same time, after a long siege, Capua fell in 211 BCE as punishment for betrayal. Rome executed its leading citizens and stripped the city of self-rule. Legend says that Hannibal, attempting to distract Roman forces, marched up to the very walls of Rome. Hannibal at the gates. Yet he did not attempt a siege. When he mockingly asked whether the land beneath his feet was for sale, the Romans replied that it had already been sold. A perfect symbol of Roman composure. A crucial turning point came in 212 BCE with the fall of Syracuse, defended by the astonishing war machines of Archimedes. In 207 BCE, Hannibal's brother, Hasdrubal, finally broke through from Spain with reinforcements, but his army was crushed at the Meteris River in northern Italy. Hasdrubal fell in battle. When Hannibal was shown his brother's severed head, he understood. Hope was gone. By 206 BCE, Scipio had completely expelled Carthaginian forces from Spain. Returning to Rome, he was elected consul for 205 BCE and granted permission to carry the war into Africa. In 204 BCE, Scipio landed near Utica. His successes terrified Carthage. The Senate recalled Hannibal from Italy, a land he had not seen for 16 years. The final confrontation occurred on October 19, 202 BCE, near Zama, 5 days' march from Carthage. This time, Scipio used Hannibal's own methods against him. He neutralized the war elephants by arranging his legions in columns with open corridors. He shattered Hannibal's cavalry. With decisive help from the Numidian king Massinissa, who had joined Rome for the first time in his life, Hannibal was defeated in a pitched battle. Carthage surrendered. The peace of 201 BCE was harsher than before. Carthage lost its fleet, except for 10 ships, lost all overseas possessions, could wage no war without Rome's permission, and paid 10,000 talents of silver over 50 years. Carthage ceased to be a great power. It became a dependent state. The Second Punic War was over. Rome at unimaginable cost. stood supreme in the western Mediterranean. Hannibal's genius, never broken on the battlefield, had been defeated by the systemic power of the Roman Republic. Yet new storms were gathering. New conquests awaited. Let this epic tale of titanic struggle, of frozen alpine passes, of blood-dark waters at Trasimene and Cannae, of Fabian patience and Scipionic brilliance, slowly fade within your mind, making space for rest and sleep. With the Second Punic War concluded, Rome stood at the threshold of a new age, no longer merely a regional Italian power. Rome was now the hegemon of the West, its gaze turned eastward, toward the wealthy, cultured, and divided kingdoms of the Hellenistic world. While Scipio's legions finished pacifying Africa, the Senate already planned intervention in Macedonia. King Philip V, former ally of Hannibal, remained an enemy. In 200 BCE, Rome declared war. The Second Macedonian War. In 197 BCE, at Cynocephalae, the Dogs' Heads, Roman legions under Titus Quinctius Flamininus met the famous Macedonian phalanx. The hilly terrain shattered the rigid formation. Flexible Roman maniples tore into its broken ranks. Macedon was crushed. Philip V abandoned all possessions in Greece and Asia Minor, surrendered his fleet, and paid massive indemnities. At the Isthmian Games in 196 BCE, ruled by Antiochus III, called the Great, he dreamed of restoring an empire from the Aegean to India. To his court fled Rome's greatest enemy, Hannibal. Collision was inevitable. In 192 BCE, Antiochus landed in Greece, hoping to spark rebellion. The Greeks did not rise. In 191 BCE, at Thermopylae, where Leonidas once stood, Roman legions under Manius Cecilius Glabrio defeated Antiochus. He fled to Asia. Rome pursued. In 190 BCE, Lucius Cornelius Scipio, brother of Africanus, marched east. Africanus himself accompanied him. At Magnesia, Antiochus' vast army was annihilated. The Peace of Apamea, 188 BCE, stripped Antiochus of Asia Minor west of Taurus, confiscated his fleet, and imposed 15,000 talents in tribute. Asia Minor was divided between Rome's allies. Hannibal fled once more, and finally took poison in Bithynia, when Rome demanded his surrender. In just 2 decades, Rome had shattered 2 great Hellenistic monarchies. It was now the arbiter of Mediterranean politics, yet triumph concealed decay. While senators and generals divided eastern riches, ordinary Romans, the very soldiers who won the wars, returned to ruined farms, mortgaged land, and empty purses. Italy flooded with cheap slaves. Small farmers collapsed. They sold their land and drifted to the city, becoming an urban proletariat, or labored as tenants on what once had been their own soil. From this tension rose 2 brothers, symbols of reform and tragedy, Tiberius and Gaius Gracchus. Tiberius Sempronius Gracchus, born into one of the noblest families of Rome, grandson of Scipio Africanus himself, was elected tribune of the people for the year 133 BCE. What he witnessed in Etruria shook him to the core. Vast empty lands, worked by chained slaves, and the near disappearance of the free Roman peasantry. From this shock was born a bold vision, an agrarian reform. Tiberius proposed to revive an ancient law, limiting occupation of public land, the ager publicus, to 500 eugera, roughly 125 hectares. All excess land was to be confiscated and redistributed to Rome's poorest citizens in small plots of 30 eugera, with no right of sale. The reaction was explosive. The senatorial aristocracy, which had quietly seized enormous tracts of public land over generations, rose in fury. Another tribune, Marcus Octavius, bribed by the Optimates, vetoed the law. Then Tiberius did the unthinkable. He appealed directly to the people to remove Octavius from office, a terrifying precedent. A magistrate, made subordinate to the will of the crowd. The people voted yes. Octavius was deposed. The law passed. A special commission of 3 was created. Tiberius himself, his brother Gaius, and his father-in-law, Appius Claudius. But time was running out. Tiberius' term was nearing its end, and the reform had barely begun. Fearing that his enemies would undo everything, yet sacred traditions, his opponents, led by the Pontifex Maximus Scipio Nasica, accused him of seeking kingship. On election day, senators and their clients, armed with clubs and broken bench legs, stormed the forum. Tiberius Gracchus and over 300 supporters were beaten to death. The first blood of a coming age of civil wars. Yet the cause of the Gracchi did not die. 10 years later, in 123 BCE, his younger brother, Gaius Gracchus, was elected tribune. Even more brilliant, more determined, a master organizer, Gaius understood. His reforms were vast. First, he renewed land redistribution. From now on, Rome's poorest citizens could purchase grain at a fixed symbolic price. The first true system of state welfare in history. A bond was forged between the urban masses and their benefactor. Third, Gaius reformed the courts. He stripped senators of their monopoly on juries and transferred judicial power to the equestrian order, wealthy financiers, tax farmers, and merchants. A new political force was born. Finally, he proposed granting Roman citizenship to Italy's allies. A revolutionary idea that frightened even some of his supporters. But his popularity waned. In 121 BCE, marched against Gracchus' supporters, who had occupied the Aventine Hill. Gaius refused to suffer his brother's fate. He ordered his slave to kill him. In the reprisals that followed, the old republican institutions could no longer resolve deep social conflict peacefully. Politics gave way to violence. Meanwhile, new dangers gathered on Rome's frontiers. In North Africa, the kingdom of Numidia descended into dynastic war between the lawful king Adharbal and his illegitimate cousin Jugurtha. Bribed by Jugurtha's gold, the Romang Senate divided the kingdom. Jugurtha soon revealed his true nature. In 112 BCE, he seized Cirta, murdered Adherbal, and massacred the population, including many Romang and Italian merchants. Rome erupted in fury. The Jugurthine War began. The early years were a humiliation. Roman commanders, bribed and compromised, signed disgraceful treaties. The belief spread that the entire nobility was corrupt. Once again, the equestrian order intervened. Their financial interests in Africa were suffering. Under their pressure, command was given to an unknown, but capable and honest general. Marius was a new man, a homo novus with no senatorial ancestors. From now on, any citizen, regardless of wealth, could enlist. The state provided equipment, paid wages. Service lasted 16 years, later 20, then 25. Afterward, the veteran received land. The consequences were enormous. The citizen militia became a professional army. But more important, the legionary's loyalty shifted, not to the Republic, but to his commander. The man who paid him led him to victory and promised land. Personal loyalty became political power. Marius proved it. He crushed Jugurtha, who was captured by Marius' quaestor, Lucius Cornelius Sulla. No sooner had Africa been pacified than disaster struck the north. Germanic tribes, the Cimbri and Teutones, moving from the Baltic, destroyed Roman armies at Nerea in 113 BCE and at Arausio in 105 BCE. Arausio was a catastrophe on the scale of Cannæ. Up to 80,000 legionaries died. Rome panicked. Marius, the only man trusted, was elected consul 5 times in succession, an unprecedented violation of law. In 102 BCE, he annihilated the Teutones at Aquae Sextiae in southern Gaul. In 101 BCE, he destroyed the Cimbri at Vercellae in northern Italy. Marius became savior of the fatherland, the third founder of Rome, yet his rise revealed a dark truth. He who commands the army commands the republic. While Marius celebrated triumph, a new storm gathered in the east, in Asia Minor. The kingdom of Pontus fell under the rule of Mithridates v. Eupator, brilliant, ambitious, ruthless. He dreamed of an empire. In 88 BCE, he ordered the massacre of all Romans and Italians in Asia Minor. Between 80 and 150,000 were slaughtered. He invaded Roman Asia and advanced into Greece. The Senate entrusted the war to Lucius Cornelius Sulla, former quaestor of Marius, an aristocrat to the core, ambitious, cold, and ruthless. But the popular assembly, urged on by the tribune Sulpicius Rufus, transferred the command to Marius, who hungered for new glory. And then Sulla did the unthinkable. His authority had been stripped away, yet instead of submitting, he turned his 6 legions, legions already preparing to sail east toward Rome itself. For the first time in history, a Roman army marched against its own city. Marius and his supporters fled. Sulla entered Rome, and in 87 BCE, pushed through rapid reforms in favor of the Senate. Then he departed for Greece to wage war against Mithridates. But the moment Sulla left Italy, the balance collapsed. The consul Lucius Cornelius Cinna, a supporter of Marius, rose in rebellion, joined by the returning Marius. They seized Rome. What followed became known as the Marian Terror. Senators and equestrians loyal to Sulla were declared outlaws. Their severed heads were displayed on the rostra, the speaker's platform in the forum. Marius was elected consul for the 7th time, for the year 86 BCE, and within days died delirious, consumed by thirst for power and blood. While Rome drowned in violence, Sulla fought brilliantly in Greece. He besieged Athens, which had revolted against Rome, and captured it by storm in 86 BCE. He defeated Mithridates' armies at Chaeronea and at Orchomenus. Mithridates was forced to sue for peace in 85 BCE, abandoning all conquests, handing over his fleet, and paying a massive indemnity. Now, Sulla could return. In 83 BCE, he landed in Italy. Many young nobles rallied to his banner, among them a dazzling figure, Gnaeus Pompeius, son of a former consul, who on his own initiative raised 3 legions. After a savage civil war, Sulla crushed his enemies, and at the end of 82 BCE, entered Rome in triumph. Scipio had once captured Carthage. Sulla captured his own city. Sulla's dictatorship was legalized by special law, but this was not the traditional 6-month office. It was unlimited authority to rewrite laws and reorganize the state. He began with prescriptions, lists of men declared enemies of the state. Anyone could kill them. Their property was confiscated. 90 senators and over 2,600 equestrians perished. Sulla rewarded his veterans with seized estates and annihilated his political foes. Then came his reforms. Their goal, to strengthen the Senate forever and cripple the people's assemblies and the tribunes. Tribunician power was reduced almost to nothing. The Senate, expanded by 300 loyal supporters, once again became the supreme authority. It seemed Sulla had achieved everything. And then, in 79 BCE, to universal astonishment, He resigned the dictatorship, retired to private life, claiming he wished to write his memoirs. 1 year later, he died on his estate in Campania. His system did not endure, but he had proven something terrible, that the republic could be seized by force, and that whoever commands a loyal army can command Rome. As the ashes of Sulla's pyre drifted over Italy, new stars were already rising. Marcus Licinius Crassus, immensely wealthy, utterly ruthless. Gnaeus Pompey, brilliant commander. The young butcher of Sulla, and a young patrician from the ancient but impoverished Julian clan. Gaius Julius Caesar. Their alliances and rivalries would decide the fate of the Republic. But that is a story for another night. For now, let the images fade, the noble Gracchi falling beneath clubs, Marius soldiers swearing loyalty, and the bloody ghost of Sulla walking Rome's streets, softly dissolving into silence, into rest, into sleep. Yet the silence was deceptive. Sulla's order was already cracking. A new generation had learned his lesson. Power lies in loyal legions. And upon this dimly lit stage, 3 figures stepped forward. First, Gnaeus Pompeius Magnus, Pompey the Great, a gifted commander who crushed the last Marian strongholds in Sicily and Africa. In 77 BCE, the Senate sent into Spain against the remnants of the Marian faction, led by Quintus Sertorius, a brilliant strategist who had built a parallel Roman state. After years of hard fighting, Sertorius was murdered by his own officer. Pompey returned to Italy, just as another nightmare erupted. The greatest slave uprising in Roman history, led by the Thracian gladiator, Spartacus. 73 to 71 BCE, it began with 78 gladiators. Escaping a school in Capua, tens of thousands soon joined them. Slaves from plantations, shepherds, deserters, all rallied around Spartacus, a born commander. For 2 years, his army shattered legion after legion. They reached Cisalpine Gaul, then turned south, seeking passage to Sicily. Rome trembled. Both consuls sent against Spartacus were killed. At last, command was given to Marcus Licinius Crassus, obscenely rich, ambitious, merciless. He restored discipline with decimation, executing every 10th soldier of fleeing units. In 71 BCE, Crassus trapped Spartacus in southern Italy. A final battle. Spartacus fell. His army was destroyed. 6,000 prisoners were crucified along the Appian Way from Capua to Rome. At that moment, Pompey returned from Spain. He defeated scattered fugitives and loudly claimed he had ended the war. A deep hatred ignited between Pompey and Crassus. Yet both understood the Senate would grant neither sole power. Defying the Optimates, they marched their armies to Rome and demanded the consulship for 70 BCE. The threat worked. An informal alliance was born. As consuls, they dismantled key parts of Sulla's constitution, restored the powers of the tribunes, returned jury control to the equestrian order. Pompey wanted more glory, and soon an opportunity appeared. Pirates infested the Mediterranean. Trade collapsed. Coastal cities burned. Grain prices in Rome soared. In 67 BCE, the tribune Aulus Gabinius passed a law granting Pompey extraordinary powers. 3 years, command over the entire Mediterranean, and 50 miles inland, a vast fleet, a vast army. The Senate protested. The people approved. Pompey justified their trust. In 3 months, he crushed piracy, not only with force, but with mercy, resettling captured pirates inland. Then, by the law of Manilius, Pompey received command against Mithridates. The Third Mithridatic War. The old king of Pontus had risen once more. Pompey's campaign in the east was nothing short of triumphant. He crushed Mithridates. The old king fled north, to the distant shores of Crimea, where pursued by his own son, he took his own life. Then Pompey turned upon the shattered remnants of the Seleucid Empire. He conquered Syria, and in 64 BCE transformed it into a Roman province. City after city opened its gates. King after king bowed in submission. Pompey marched across the entire Near East, founding cities, settling disputes, redrawing borders, as if he were a living law. New and fabulously wealthy provinces flowed into Rome's grasp: Bithynia and Pontus, Cilicia, Syria. In 63 BCE, he entered Jerusalem, intervening in a bitter dynastic struggle among the Hasmoneans. Pompey the Great now stood as the most powerful man in the Roman world, a new Alexander. While Pompey conquered the East, Rome itself smoldered with tension. In 63 BCE, consulship fell to Marcus Tullius Cicero, a new man from Arpinum, the greatest orator of his age, a passionate defender of the Republic. His rival was Lucius Sergius Catiline, an aristocrat ruined by debt, yet consumed by limitless ambition. After losing the election, Catiline gathered around him impoverished nobles, sullen veterans, and desperate urban poor. Their goal: seize power, cancel debts, burn the old order. Cicero uncovered the conspiracy through spies, informers, whispers in the dark. He delivered 4 thunderous speeches in the Senate. Catiline fled Rome to join his armed followers. 5 leading conspirators remaining in the city were executed without trial, by decree of the Senate, illegal, dangerous. Soon after, Catiline's army was crushed. He himself fell in battle. Cicero was hailed as father of the fatherland, yet a shadow clung to his glory. He had ordered the death of Roman citizens without due process, a precedent that would return to haunt him. At the same time, another figure quietly rose, a young patrician from the ancient Julian line, nephew of Marius' wife, Gaius Julius Caesar. He possessed neither Crassus' wealth nor Pompey's battlefield fame, but he was brilliant, generous, charismatic, and ferociously ambitious. He allied himself with Crassus, using his money to climb the political ladder. In 63 BCE, Caesar won election as Pontifex Maximus, chief priest of Rome, defeating men far more powerful than himself. His first great victory. In 62 BCE, Pompey returned to Italy, laden with treasure and glory. He disbanded his army, expecting the Senate to ratify his eastern settlements and grant land to his veterans. But the Senate, led by Cato the Younger, embodiment of austere virtue, feared his power. They delayed, obstructed, sabotaged. Pompey the Conqueror found himself helpless inside the web of senatorial intrigue. It was then that Caesar, fresh from his governorship in Spain, offered a bold solution: an alliance: Pompey, Crassus, Caesar. Forget old grudges. Work together. In 60 BCE, the first triumvirate was born, a private pact that shook the Republic to its foundations. United, they secured Caesar's election as consul for 59 BCE. His consulship openly trampled tradition. Laws were forced through by intimidation and street violence. Pompey's eastern acts were approved. Land was granted to his veterans. To seal the alliance, Pompey married Julia, Caesar's only daughter. After his consulship, Caesar received Cisalpine Gaul and Illyricum for 5 years, later adding Transalpine Gaul. Before departing, he placed in Rome his loyal agent, the tribune Publius Clodius. Clodius terrorized the Optimates and drove Cicero into exile. In 58 BC, Caesar arrived in Gaul. Thus began the Gallic Wars, 9 years of fire and blood. He defeated the Helvetii, drove back the German king Ariovistus, subdued the Belgae in the north, and the Aquitani in the south. His commentaries, masterpieces of propaganda, flowed back to Rome, painting him as invincible. In 55 BCE, he crossed the Rhine on a massive bridge to terrify the Germans. He sailed to Britain, a land half-legend to Roman ears. But Gaul did not submit quietly. In 52 BCE, the tribes rose under Vercingetorix, young, charismatic, brilliant. He burned his own lands, starving Caesar. Avoiding pitched battle, Caesar trapped him at Alesia, built 2 rings of fortifications, one facing inward, one outward, crushed the relief army. Vercingetorix surrendered. Gaul was conquered, soon Romanized, one of Rome's richest provinces. While Caesar fought in Gaul, the political balance in Rome collapsed. In 54 BCE, Julia died. The bond between Caesar and Pompey snapped. In 53 BCE, Crassus perished at Carrhae, slaughtered by the Parthians. The triumvirate was no more. The Senate saw Caesar as the ultimate threat. Pompey drifted toward the Optimates. The question became simple: who would rule Rome? Caesar's command was ending. He demanded the right to run for consul in absentia, without dismissing his army. Otherwise, he faced prosecution. The Senate refused. In January 49 BC, the Senate declared Caesar an enemy of the state and granted Pompey emergency powers. The consuls and most senators fled south, then crossed to Greece to raise a massive army. Caesar moved swiftly. He occupied Italy almost without resistance, smashed Pompeian forces in Spain, then crossed to Greece himself. The decisive battle came on the 9th day of August, 48 BCE, at Pharsalus in Thessaly. Pompey's army outnumbered Caesar's, but numbers meant little before discipline, before experience, before genius. Caesar's Gallic veterans, hardened by a decade of war, held firm. His cavalry trap, his flexible formations, his unbreakable center decided everything. Pompey's line collapsed. The great commander fled. Pompey sailed to Egypt, seeking refuge, but found betrayal. The advisors of the young King Ptolemy XIII, hoping to please Caesar, ordered Pompey murdered. His head was severed. When Caesar arrived and was presented with it, he is said to have wept. For an enemy? Yes, but an enemy worthy of Rome. Caesar entered Alexandria in pursuit of the war. There he was drawn into a dynastic struggle between Ptolemy XIII and his sister wife, Cleopatra VII, young, brilliant, dangerously intelligent. Caesar chose her side. During the winter of 48 to 47 BCE, Caesar was besieged inside the royal quarter. Mob violence, Egyptian troops, fire, chaos. At one moment, he swam for his life through burning harbor waters, holding his papers above his head. Reinforcements arrived. The enemy was crushed. Ptolemy drowned in the Nile. Cleopatra became queen and Caesar's lover. From their union was born a son, Caesarion. Next came speed, lightning war. In Asia Minor, Caesar crushed Pharnaces, son of Mithridates. His report to Rome contained 3 words: Veni, vidi, vici, I came, I saw. I conquered Dot, then Africa. The last Pompeians were defeated at Thapsus. In 46 BC, Cato the Younger, symbol of republican virtue, chose suicide rather than submission. Then Spain. At Munda in 45 BCE, Pompey's sons were destroyed. The civil war ended. Caesar returned to Rome, sole master of the Roman world. Power gathered around him like a rising tide. Dictator for 10 years, then dictator for life. Imperator as a permanent name. Tribunician authority. Pontifex Maximus. Father of the fatherland. He reformed the calendar, creating the Julian calendar. He reorganized laws, reduced grain recipients, expanded the Senate, filling it with supporters and provincials. He planned vast campaigns against the Parthians, against the Dacians, yet his power, openly monarchic, terrified the aristocracy. Caesar dismissed his personal bodyguard, ignored warnings. He said, "It is better to die once than to live forever in fear." The conspiracy formed among former Pompeians, whom Caesar had pardoned, even among his friends, Gaius Cassius Longinus and Marcus Junius Brutus, descendant of the man who once expelled kings from Rome, a symbol of republican honor. The Ides of March, March 15th, 44 BCE, inside the theater of Pompey. The Senate convened. The conspirators surrounded Caesar. 23 wounds. When he saw Brutus, he is said to whisper, "You too, my child?" He fell at the foot of Pompey's statue. The killers called themselves liberators. They believed the Republic would revive. They were wrong. Rome loved Caesar. The crowd erupted. Riots, fire, chaos. Power collapsed into a vacuum. 3 men stepped forward. Gaius Octavius, Caesar's grandnephew, adopted by his will, now Gaius Julius Caesar Octavianus, Mark Antony, Caesar's loyal general, and Marcus Aemilius Lepidus, enemies at first. But in 43 BCE, they formed the second triumvirate, legal, official. Their first act, prescriptions, more savage than Sulla's. The Ides of March had not saved the Republic. They had opened another civil war. Brutus and Cassius fled east. At Philippi, 42 BCE, the armies met. 2 brutal battles. Cassius committed suicide. Brutus followed, falling on his sword. With them, the Republic truly died. The world was divided. Antony took the east, Octavian the west, Lepidus Africa. Octavian seemed weakest, young, sickly, mocked as a boy. But beneath the frailty hid iron will, relentless patience, cold intelligence. In the east, fate awaited Antony. In 41 BCE, he summoned Cleopatra to Tarsus. She arrived on a golden barge, purple sails billowing, as Aphrodite incarnate. Antony was captivated. Politics became passion. He divorced Octavian's sister, bound himself to Cleopatra, adopted Eastern luxury, failed in Parthia. Then came the donations of Alexandria. Antony granted Eastern territories to Cleopatra and their children. Rome was outraged. Meanwhile, Octavian played the Ramon, restorer of tradition, defender of morality. He crushed Sextus Pompey, stripped Lepidus of power, absorbed his legions, and unleashed propaganda. Poets like Horace portrayed Antony as a drunken slave of an Egyptian queen, a traitor to Rome. Rome was outraged. The Senate, under Octavian's pressure, declared war in 32 BCE, not on Antony, but formally on Cleopatra herself. Rome presented the conflict as a foreign war, a defense of Roman honor against an Eastern queen. The decisive moment came on September 2nd, 31 BCE, off the coast of western Greece, at Actium. Octavian's fleet was commanded by his loyal friend and brilliant admiral, Marcus Vipsanius Agrippa. 2 vast armadas met upon restless waters. Rams crashed, oars shattered. Smoke drifted across the sea. Then, in the heart of battle, Cleopatra's squadron turned away. Her ships caught the wind and fled toward open sea. Antony saw her sails and abandoned everything. He left his own fighting fleet and followed her. Their combined forces collapsed. The battle was lost. The world was decided. 1 year later, Octavian invaded Egypt. Antony, trapped in Alexandria, received false news that Cleopatra was dead. Believing himself alone, he fell upon his sword. Cleopatra still lived, But she understood. Octavian intended to parade her in chains during his triumph. She chose another ending. According to legend, she pressed a venomous asp to her breast. Thus died the last queen of Egypt. Caesarion, son of Julius Caesar, was executed on Octavian's orders. The Ptolemaic kingdom ended. Egypt became Octavian's personal province, the richest granary of Rome. In 29 BCE, Octavian returned to Rome. He stood alone at the summit of power, but he remembered Caesar's fate. He chose caution, patience, illusion. In 27 BC, he ceremonially surrendered his extraordinary powers and proclaimed the restoration of the Republic. The grateful Senate granted him a new name, Augustus, the revered one, the exalted. He retained control of the armies, imperial authority, tribunician power, princeps senatus, first among equals. Thus was born the Principate, a monarchy disguised as a republic. The Roman Republic was dead. The Roman Empire was born. Augustus ruled from 27 BCE to 14 CEA, Golden Age, the age of Augustus. Poetry flourished. Virgil wrote the Aeneid. Horace composed immortal odes. Ovid sang of love and myth. Agrippa transformed Rome with aqueducts, roads, baths, and the Pantheon. Augustus said, "I found Rome a city of brick. I left it a city of marble." He reformed taxation, administration. The army became professional and permanently stationed. The Alps were conquered, Spain fully subdued. In the east, diplomacy achieved what war could not. Parthia returned Rome's lost standards. Yet darkness remained. In 09 CE, in the Teutoburg forest, 3 legions were annihilated by Germanic warriors led by Arminius. Rome never again pushed beyond the Rhine. Augustus is said to have cried, "Varus, give me back my legions." His private life was sorrowful. No surviving sons. He buried heirs, one by one. At last, he adopted his stepson, Tiberius. Augustus died in 14 CE. Power passed to Tiberius. From this moment, authority in Rome came not from law, but from the will of the ruling princeps. The Julio-Claudian dynasty began. Tiberius 1437 CE was capable, disciplined, cold. He lacked warmth. Paranoia grew. The Praetorian prefect, Sejanus, ruled through fear, trials, executions. After Sejanus fell, Tiberius withdrew to Capri. Rome was governed by whispers and blood. His death was celebrated. Power passed to Gaius Julius Caesar Germanicus. Caligula, little boot. At first, beloved, then madness, cruelty, extravagance. He demanded worship, emptied the treasury. According to tradition, he planned to make his horse consul. In 41 CE, he was murdered by his own guards. The Praetorians found Claudius hiding in the palace. They proclaimed him emperor, a scholar, a builder. Under Claudius, Britain was conquered. Roads and aqueducts multiplied. Yet intrigue ruled his household. Messalina, then Agrippina. In 54 CE, Claudius was poisoned. Nero ascended at 16. At first, guided, moderate. Then the mask fell. He murdered his mother, his wife, senators. In 64 CE, Rome burned. Rumors whispered. Nero watched and sang. He blamed Christians. Executions followed. Crucifixion, fire, beasts. In 68 CE, rebellion spread. Abandoned, Nero took his own life. What an artist dies with me. The dynasty ended. 69 CE, the year of 4 emperors. Civil war returned. Rome once again stood at the edge of chaos. Meanwhile, the legions on the Rhine proclaimed their own emperor, Vitellius. Otho, defeated at the First Battle of Bedriacum, chose suicide rather than humiliation. But while Vitellius feasted in Rome, the Eastern legions swore loyalty to their commander, Vespasian, an experienced general of humble origin, who at that very moment was suppressing the great Jewish revolt. His forces, led by Mucianus and Antonius Primus, marched west, defeated Vitellius' armies in the Second Battle of Bedriacum, and entered Rome. Vitellius was dragged through the streets and brutally killed. By the end of 69 CE, Vespasian stood as sole ruler. The Flavian dynasty had begun. Vespasian ruled from 69 to 79 CE. He was practical, severe, frugal. He restored discipline to the army, rebuilt the exhausted treasury. He even imposed a tax on public latrines. When his son Titus objected, Vespasian held up a coin and said, "Money does not smell." Under his reign began the construction of the Flavian amphitheater, known to the world as the Colosseum. Vespasian died peacefully in 79 CE. Power passed to his eldest son, Titus. Titus ruled from 79 to 81 CE. His reign was brief, but beloved. Ancient writers called him the darling and delight of mankind. Yet fate tested him harshly. In 79 CE, Mount Vesuvius erupted. Pompeii, Herculaneum, Stabia, buried beneath ash and fire. Soon after, a devastating plague struck Rome. Titus personally organized relief. He exhausted the treasury to ease suffering. He died of fever in 81 CE. His brother Domitian succeeded him. Domitian ruled from 81 to 96 CE at first. An energetic administrator, he strengthened the frontiers, secured the lands between Rhine and Danube, completed the Colosseum, built extensively in Rome, but gradually fear consumed him. He demanded to be called Dominus et Deus, Lord and God. He unleashed terror against senators, confiscations, executions. Rome grew silent with dread. In 96 CE, Domitian was assassinated in a palace conspiracy, in which even his wife was involved. His Senate proclaimed emperor an elderly, respected aristocrat, Nerva, 96 to 98 CE. With him began the age of the 5 good emperors. Nerva knew he lacked military support, so he adopted and named as heir the empire's finest general, Marcus Ulpius Trajan. Trajan ruled from 98 to 117 CE, born in Spain. The first provincial emperor, soldier, builder, administrator. Under Trajan, the empire reached its greatest extent. Dacia was conquered. Arabia Petrea became a province. War with Parthia brought Armenia, Mesopotamia, and Assyria under Roman control. In Rome rose Trajan's Forum, Trajan's Column, magnificent baths. He died in 117 CE, adopting Hadrian. Hadrian ruled from 117 to 138 C, the opposite of Trajan. He abandoned expansion, chose consolidation, defense. He traveled constantly, inspected armies, cities, frontiers. In Britain, he built Hadrian's Wall. In Rome, he rebuilt the Pantheon. Hadrian loved Greek culture, wrote poetry, designed buildings. His beloved companion Antinous drowned in the Nile. Hadrian mourned him deeply. Statues were raised, a city founded in his name. Before dying, Hadrian adopted Antoninus Pius. Antoninus Pius ruled from 138 to 161 CE, peaceful, just, benevolent. He avoided major wars, strengthened administration, built defensive works in Britain. He passed power to his adopted son, Marcus Aurelius. Marcus Aurelius, 161 to 180 CE philosopher emperor, author of the Meditations. The Golden Age ended under his reign. Parthians invaded the east. Romans eventually captured Ctesiphon. But soldiers carried back a terrible plague. Millions died. Germanic tribes flooded the Danube frontier. Marcus spent years in military camps, writing philosophy by lamplight. He planned new provinces, but died in 180 CE, leaving power to his biological son, Commodus. 180 to 192 CE, a fatal mistake. The adoption principle ended. Commodus resembled a second Nero. He abandoned the frontiers, fought as a gladiator, called himself Hercules, indulged in cruelty and excess. Government collapsed into corruption. In 192 CE, he was strangled in his bath by conspirators, including his own mistress. The Antonine dynasty ended. What followed was chaos, the age of soldier emperors, legions selling the throne to the highest bidder, civil war, assassination, blood, iron. The first to follow Commodus was the elderly senator Publius Helvius Pertinax, who tried to restore discipline, but would soon learn that Rome had entered a darker age. After 86 days, Pertinax was murdered by mutinous Praetorian guards. Then, in an act without precedent, the throne itself was put up for auction. The highest bidder was the wealthy senator Didius Julianus. His reign lasted 66 days. Across the empire, legions proclaimed their own emperors. Clodius Albinus in Britain, Pausanias Niger in Syria, Septimius Severus in Pannonia, among them. Septimius Severus proved strongest. Born in Lepsis Magna in Africa, a hard soldier, a relentless commander, he marched swiftly on Rome, executed Didius Julianus, defeated Pausanias Niger, then crushed Clodius Albinus. Severus became sole ruler. The Severan dynasty began. Severus reshaped the empire. He dissolved the old Praetorian Guard, replaced it with loyal Danubian soldiers. The army became the true foundation of power. Soldiers' pay was increased. Officers entered the Senate. Rome became an empire of soldiers. Severus died in Britain during a campaign. His final advice to his sons: stay united, enrich the soldiers, despise everyone else. Power passed to Caracalla. 211 to 217 CE, Caracalla began by murdering his brother in their mother's arms. In 212 CE, he issued the Constitutio Antoniniana, Roman citizenship to almost all free inhabitants of the empire. A bold act, unifying, yet also emptying citizenship of its old meaning. His other legacy, the colossal baths of Caracalla. In 217 CE, he was assassinated on orders of the Praetorian prefect, Macrinus. Macrinus briefly ruled, then fell. The army proclaimed emperor a 14-year-old priest, Elagabalus. 218 to 222 CE. His reign became a symbol of scandal and religious extremism. He tried to impose the cult of the Syrian sun god upon Rome. Outrage followed. Elagabalus was murdered by the Praetorians. They placed on the throne his cousin Alexander Severus. Alexander Severus ruled from 222 to 235 CE. Real power lay with his mother. Attempts were made to restore cooperation with the Senate, but discipline collapsed. Persia, reborn as the Sassanid Empire, pressed the eastern frontier. Germanic tribes advanced in the west. In Germany, Alexander and his mother were murdered by soldiers. The Severan dynasty ended. Anarchy began. Historians call it the crisis of the 3rd century. Empire shattered. Economy collapsed. Coinage debased. Trade reverted to barter. Plague ravaged cities. Breakaway states arose. The Gallic Empire in the west, the Palmyrene Empire in the east, led by Queen Zenobia. Rome seemed near death, but the empire endured, saved by soldier emperors from Illyria. Hard, men-iron wills. Aurelian, 270 to 275 CE. Restorer of the world. He defeated invaders, reunited the empire, crushed Palmyra, defeated Zenobia, built massive walls around Rome, established the cult of Sol Invictus, the unconquered sun. He was murdered by officers who believed a false report that he planned their execution. Then came Diocletian, 284 to 305 CE, son of a freedman, a visionary. He understood one man could no longer rule alone. He created the Tetrarchy, rule of four, 2 Augusti, 2 Caesars. East and West, order returned, borders stabilized. Reforms reshaped administration, taxes standardized, provinces subdivided. The state became a disciplined machine. Diocletian persecuted Christians, seeing them as a threat to unity. Then, in 305 CE, he did the unthinkable. He abdicated, retired. The system collapsed soon after. Civil war returned. From chaos rose Constantine, 306 to 337 CE. At the Battle of the Milvian Bridge, 312 CE, he saw a vision, a cross. The words, "In this sign you shall conquer." He won. In 313 CE, the Edict of Milan granted Christians legal status. In 324 CE, Constantine became sole ruler. He founded a new capital, Constantinople, New Rome, on the Bosphorus. The empire's future turned eastward. Christianity rose. A new world was born. Constantine died in 337 CE. The empire passed to his sons. Their struggles weakened Rome. After brief pagan revival under Julian, power fell to the Valentinian dynasty. Valentinian I ruled the west. Valens ruled the east. The empire stood divided, yet still alive, still breathing, still Roman. In the year 376, a moment arrived that would reshape the destiny of Europe. Driven westward by the thunder of the Huns, warriors from the distant steppes of Asia, the Visigoths appeared on the banks of the Danube, desperate, hungry, terrified. They begged the Eastern Roman Emperor Valens for refuge. Valens granted permission. The gates were opened. The river was crossed. An entire people entered Roman soil. But greed followed mercy. Roman officials exploited the refugees, sold rotten food at extortionate prices, sold children into slavery, humiliated those who had trusted Rome. Despair turned into rage. Rage turned into rebellion. On the 9th of August, 378 CE, near the city of Adrianople, two worlds collided. The Roman army, once invincible, was annihilated. The Gothic cavalry smashed the legions. Formations collapsed. Shields shattered. Valens himself was killed on the battlefield. His body was never found. This defeat marked more than a lost battle. It marked the end of classical Roman warfare, the end of the old legions, and the beginning of the great migration of peoples, a slow-moving human tide that would drown the Western Empire. Valens' successor, Theodosius I, called the Great, ruled from 379 to 395, a capable statesman, a tireless organizer. He restored temporary stability, made peace with the Goths, settled them as federates, allied warriors guarding imperial frontiers. In 380 CE, Theodosius issued the Edict of Thessalonica. Nicene Christianity became the official religion of the empire. Pagan sacrifices were banned. Ancient temples closed. The Olympic Games ended forever. An age-old spiritual world quietly died. Another was born. In 394, Theodosius reunited the empire briefly by defeating the usurper Eugenius. But on his deathbed in 395, he divided the empire between his sons. Arcadius received the east, Honorius received the west. This division became permanent. The Roman world would never again be whole. The 5th century was the long agony of the Western Roman Empire. Weak emperors, endless intrigue. True power lay with military strongmen, often of Germanic origin. One man stood out, Stilicho, half Vandal, half Roman, a loyal defender of Rome. He defeated multiple invasions, held the crumbling West together, but court conspiracies destroyed him. In 408, Stilicho was executed. Rome lost its last great shield. 2 years later, in 410 CE, the unthinkable happened. The Visigoths, led by Alaric, entered Rome. The Eternal City was plundered. For the first time in 800 years, the shock echoed across the world. St. Jerome wrote, "The city that conquered the world has itself been conquered." More waves followed. In 429, the Vandals crossed into North Africa. By 439, they seized Carthage, Rome's greatest grain supply. Their fleets ruled the seas. The Mediterranean became a pirate's realm. In 451, one final moment of Roman glory. On the Catalonian plains, Roman forces under Aetius and their Visigothic allies halted Attila the Hun. Europe was spared, but Rome was exhausted. This was the last great Roman victory. In 455, the Vandals sacked Rome again, brutally, methodically, mercilessly. The last decades of the Western Empire were a sad procession of puppet emperors. Real authority belonged to the barbarian general Ricimer. Then came 476 CE. A Germanic soldier named Odoacer deposed a boy emperor, Romulus Augustulus, a name heavy with symbolism. Romulus, founder of Rome. Augustus, founder of the empire. The circle closed. Odoacer sent the imperial insignia to Constantinople, declaring, "The West no longer needs an emperor." The Eastern Emperor Zeno recognized him as ruler of Italy. The Western Roman Empire was gone, not with a thunderclap, but with a whisper. On its ruins arose barbarian kingdoms. Visigoths in Spain, Franks in Gaul, Vandals in Africa, Ostrogoths in Italy, Anglo-Saxons in Britain. Antiquity ended. The Middle Ages began. Yet Rome did not truly die. The Eastern Roman Empire endured. What we call Byzantium. Rich, urbanized, diplomatic, resilient. Under Emperor Justinian I, 527 to 565, a last great attempt to restore Roman unity. Italy reclaimed, North Africa reconquered, parts of Spain recovered, Roman law codified, Hagia Sophia built, a dream of renewal, costly, magnificent, temporary. Byzantium became the guardian of Roman heritage, preserving law, learning, architecture, Christian tradition, through centuries of darkness. And so ended the epic of ancient Rome, from a village on 7 hills to a world empire, from kings to republic to empire, a story of discipline and genius, of ambition and cruelty, of order and collapse. Rome left more than ruins. It left a foundation. Roman law, Latin language, roads, cities, administration, the skeleton of Western civilization. Even after emperors vanished, the idea of Rome lived in the church, in kings' dreams, in imperial crowns, in the year 800 CE on Christmas Day. In St. Peter's Basilica, Charlemagne was crowned emperor, a new Roman Empire in the West, Frankish in blood, Roman in spirit. The dream breathed again. Later, in 962 CE, Otto I of Germany was crowned emperor. Thus was born the Holy Roman Empire, which would endure, in name, until 1806. And now, let the images fade. The Visigoths crossing the frozen Danube, the flames over Rome, the last emperor stepping aside, the golden domes of Constantinople, all drifting gently into the depths of your memory, leaving only silence and the distant echo of an empire that once ruled the world. Softly, slowly, like the final turning of a vast cosmic wheel. Meanwhile, the Eastern Roman Empire, Byzantium, continued its long journey through cycles of light and shadow. In the 9th and 10th centuries, under the Macedonian dynasty, the empire experienced a remarkable renaissance. Soldier emperors such as Nicephorus II Phocas and John I Zimisces drove Arab forces from Crete, from Cilicia, and from large parts of Syria. The frontiers expanded, cities revived. Trade flowed once more along ancient routes. Law was reorganized and clarified. Learning flourished. Libraries were restored. Artists covered church walls with shimmering mosaics. Gold backgrounds glowed like captured sunlight. At the same time, a great spiritual mission unfolded. Through the work of Saints Cyril and Methodius, Christianity reached the Slavic world. They created an alphabet, translated sacred texts, gave birth to literary cultures that would shape Eastern Europe for centuries. Yet from the 11th century onward, a slow decline began. Internal rivalries weakened the state. Great aristocratic families gained power. The army became increasingly dependent on mercenaries. In 1071, disaster struck at Manzikert. The Byzantine army was crushed by the Seljuk Turks. Emperor Romanos IV was captured. Asia Minor, the empire's heartland, its main source of soldiers, grain, and wealth, was lost. Desperate, Byzantium turned westward. It asked Latin Christendom for help. The response came, in a form no one had truly foreseen. The Crusades. The First Crusade reclaimed some territory, but it also created independent crusader states. Foreign powers now stood on lands Byzantium had once ruled. Allies became rivals. Tensions deepened. The greatest tragedy came in 1204. The Fourth Crusade. Diverted by political intrigue, Venetian ambition, and Byzantine dynastic quarrels turned against Constantinople itself. The city was stormed, churches desecrated, relics stolen, palaces burned. For 3 days, the greatest Christian city on earth was savagely looted. A Latin empire was proclaimed. Byzantine refugees founded successor states in Nicaea, Trebizond, and Epirus. In 1261, Michael VIII Palaiologos recaptured Constantinople. But the wound was mortal. Byzantium survived, yet only as a shadow, a fragile state caught between rising Ottoman power in the east and ambitious Balkan kingdoms in the west. The final centuries were a slow fading. Civil wars, economic exhaustion, theological disputes, shrinking territory, shrinking population, shrinking hope. One last appeal to the West was made. At the Council of Ferrara, Florence, in 1438 to 1439, Byzantine leaders accepted union with the Catholic Church in exchange for promised aid. But little help arrived, and the union tore Byzantine society apart. Spring 1453. Sultan Mehmed II, young, brilliant, relentless, laid siege to Constantinople. More than 100,000 Ottoman soldiers, massive cannons that shook the earth. Against them, fewer than 10,000 defenders, Greeks, Phoenicians, Genoese, all bound by desperation. For 53 days, the walls held. On the night of May 29th, the final assault began. A small gate, the Kirkoporta, was breached. Ottoman banners poured through. Emperor Constantine XI Palaiologos threw aside his purple cloak and charged into the fighting. He died as a common soldier, unrecognized, unrecorded, Roman to the end. Constantinople fell. Churches became mosques. The great palace collapsed into ruin. the thousand-year-old Roman state of the East ceased to exist. Symbolically, the Roman Empire had ended. From 753 BCE to 1453 CE, more than 2 millennia. Yet Rome's spirit did not vanish, that it transformed, that it traveled, that it endured. In Moscow, Grand Prince Ivan III married Sophia Palaeologina, niece of the last Byzantine emperor. Moscow was proclaimed the Third Rome. There will be no fourth. In the West, the Holy Roman Empire and the papacy claimed Roman inheritance. Roman law shaped European justice. Latin remained the language of scholars. Roman forms returned in the Renaissance. As Constantinople fell, Italy was awakening. Petrarch, Boccaccio, humanists rediscovered Roman texts. Artists like Brunelleschi, Michelangelo, and Raphael studied ancient ruins, columns, domes, proportions. Rome was reborn in marble and paint. Perhaps Rome's greatest legacy is law. Justinian's Corpus Juris Civilis became the backbone of European legal systems. Concepts of contract, property, citizenship, justice, rights, duties, still shape our world today. Rome also left stone, the Colosseum, the Pantheon, aqueducts, roads stretching across continents, silent witnesses to human ambition and skill. Latin gave birth to Italian, French, Spanish, Portuguese, Romanian, and deeply influenced English. Even today we whisper Roman words, carpe diem, veni, vidae, vici, alia iacta est. The story of Rome is not only conquest and collapse, it is a lesson about power, about responsibility, about the fragile balance between order and freedom. From a small village on the Tiber, to ruler of the Mediterranean, to a memory shaping civilizations, Rome's echo never fades. And now let this long river of time grow quiet. Let the banners fall. Let the legions rest. Let the marble sleep. Carry with you only a gentle awareness that you have touched one of humanity's eternal stories, and its whisper will remain with you soft, endless, peaceful. Good night.